Good evening. Dave Crocker's with you for Chapter 5 of Warriors, Hard Chargers, and Patriots, connecting the little dots to the big dots. Tonight I want to talk about the power of presence, the power of our presence individually, the power of our presence collectively, and then the power of His presence, where some of us may or may not choose to go there, but I've used faith and just the Bible actually to help me understand some things that maybe I ought to be doing a little bit better. I don't mean to tell anybody that they ought to or need to do that, but I would like to at least share my experience and how it made me a better leader. Every leader and every follower needs to be understand that they are that this is really a power. It truly is something that is important. It has to work vertically up and down the chain of command. It has to work laterally across these various departments. There has to be as much transparency as is possible, so people who truly have, boot rubber on the meeting the road can help each other out and get things done. It sounds great. It sounds like it ought to be just a no-brainer. It certainly was essential for us getting our work done. But I've worked with some utility companies over the last couple of months trying to get some things done in our neighborhood that should have been quite simple, but internal to these utility companies, one department's not talking to the other department. They're not sharing information, and it's taking months, maybe up to a year, to get something done. It could easily be done in a week. It's sort of ridiculous, but that's the way it is. So I always wanted to make sure that my young men and women saw this power as a privilege, and they saw it as an essential accounting for other people to make sure that when they weren't necessarily up to their game, that we lifted their boat as well as lifting our own. Now, I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to digress here quickly, because this is something that this presence, this dialogue that we have with reminding people how to connect their little dot to the big dot, has to be an ongoing, continuous thing. There's a half-life to our impact. And the half-life is dictated by a variety of things. In our case, the half-life was dictated by the fact that we had a 30% turnover of our crew every year. Sounds like a lot, but that's the way the Navy operates in terms of getting people to other essential billets, and having some people decide that it's time for them to go do something else, and then bringing new blood, new young men and women into the organization. And what we historically did before we deployed is we had everyone understanding. We worked hard to make sure everyone had their little dot connected to the big dot. And when we deployed, we were probably as ready as we were ever going to be. You would have thought maybe as life gone on over the deployment, and that it would have been just the opposite. We would have been more ready after 4 or 5 months at sea. But if it takes one or two people in the chain of command to not appreciate the power of their presence in connecting that little dot to the big dot, then you have a problem. So the analogy I always tell people is called the middle 15s. And I use it quite often when I talk about this, because it's such an important topic. When the middle 15s go like this. So I like to work out. I work on elliptical trainers. I love to swim. I used to run marathons and other long distances before my body told me it was no longer I was no longer able to do that. So I broke those exercises up into 15-minute quadrants. So normally my exercise periods are about an hour. So the first 15 minutes, the first quadrant, was pretty easy for me. I was fired up. I was full of energy. I believed that I was going to break records. I was going to I was going to do better than I've ever done before. Worked on my form, kept my brain in terms of where I was at around me. Situational awareness was where it had to be. It was all there. The last 15 minutes, the last quarter of the middle 15s, same thing sort of. I mean, I'm a little more tired, and I'm probably suffering a little bit from maybe overexertion, but I can now see the finish line. And even if I'm not going to be able to break any record or set a personal best or whatever the goal is, I at least can see the finish line, and I'm more apt to put more energy and more focus on whatever it is that I'm doing to do the very best I can and finish or cross that finish line in a blaze of glory, right? In a blaze of glory. But it's those two middle 15s where we always have a problem. The two middle 15s are where we lose focus. we start to daydream. We forget to tell our young men and women that they are what their jobs are and why their jobs are important. We forget that maybe we got a new young person working an assembly line, in your case maybe, or at least maybe working down in one of my spaces doing maintenance on critical equipment on our ship. And all of a sudden the dots are no longer connected. And the work is hard, the hours are long, and they begin to wonder why in the heck it's important, right? And sometimes we end up using fear as a motivator, and fear never works. It's much easier, much better to tell a young man or woman why the job that they're doing is so important. Specifically, let me give you an example. We had 4 shafts on an aircraft carrier. Each shaft is about 150 to 160 feet long. I forget the exact number. They each are hooked up to a main engine, big main engine, steam engine. And then on the other end, outside the skin of the ship, they are hooked up to one of the 4 propellers, which are about 25 feet in diameter, 66,000 pounds or so. So it's a lot of stuff. These shafts will turn at about 177 RPM. They're filled with a glass-like material, almost like sand, that helps keep them balanced. And so all of this is going, and they're running 24/7 essentially when you're at sea, especially you're in a combat operation. We had a young man that was supposed to go down, or a woman, in this case it was a man, and every 4 hours we call diving the shafts. From one deck, which was the second deck of the ship, they'd have to climb down these little manhole ladders to go down 6 levels to get down to where the shafts were. And their job was simple. Every hour they'd go down and check the oil temperature, the oil pressure, and the oil level on the sight gauge on each of these big 5,000 pound bearings. This was the last support mechanism, if you will, that supported that shaft before the shaft met the propeller outside of the skin of the ship. So we had a young man one night, 3 o'clock. He'd been doing this for 3 or 4 weeks, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. He had been down there. He had never seen a pressure drop. He had never seen a temperature change. He had never seen an oil sight gauge that looked abnormal. So he had a command decision to make, and the decision was, am I going to go down yet on this number 1 shaft, which is the shaft all the way to the left or the port side of the ship, or am I going to go get a Coke? It's hot. I'm tired. I need some caffeine. He elected to do the latter. Well, Murphy's Law hit us, and there had been someone down there just prior to his scheduled arrival time down there to do a little bit of oil sampling, and he forgot to close the pepcock on the bearing. And the bearing dumped its oil into the bilge of the ship. And all of us heard at the same time an alarm that indicated we had a fire on the ship. Now, I'm up in my stateroom getting at 3 o'clock in the morning, getting one of the several hours of sleep that night. And that alarm comes across. I don't know where the fire is until actually I get out and I head down towards where I think it is. And so sure enough, it's on the bearing. The bearing had destroyed itself. We had locked the shaft in place to prevent any other damage. And of course, everybody wanted to take this young man and take him to mast and just make his life miserable, including me, because it put us into a very restricted operating environment with only 3 or 4 shafts to operate. It minimized the wind or limited our wind over deck to land and take off aircraft. It made it a lot more hard to maneuver when we were doing alongside operations, replenishment operations, when we were hooked up to another ship and we had to maintain plus or minus a half a degree in course and plus or minus about 10 feet fore and aft at about 150 feet away from each other. A lot of dynamics going into this. That could be a physics instruction of its own. So there's a lot going on. So he came up, we took him to mast, and I think I said this before. Mast, by the way, just as a reminder, is non-judicial punishment. It's what legal authority I have over my sailors at sea. And the chain of command is there, which is always my case, because I always believed that the chain of command played a role positively or negatively in every one of these scenarios. So, he told me what happened and why he did it. And I could just see something was on his mind, and there were tears in his eyes. So I excused the chain of command for a moment, and I said, all right, this is you and me talking now. You understand what happened What I want to understand is your motivation. What was your motivation? What did they tell you to do? Why this job was important? And he just sort of hesitated for a moment. He says, "Well, what I got told, Captain, was that I'm supposed to take these various samples every hour, and after 4 hours, I take my sample sheet back to my chief down in damage control, and if I don't do my job right, he's going to kick my ass." Well, that was not really what I wanted to hear. I said, "Did not anybody never tell you why this job's important and what's now going to have to happen as we are sitting out here without this 5,000? We don't carry spare 5,000-pound bearings on the ship. The nearest one was in Norfolk, Virginia, and we were in the Persian Gulf. So we had 5-6 weeks where we had to wait for this bearing to get flown out to the ship, and along with the maintainers from the shipyard that were going to fix it. So we assembled everyone back. I dismissed the charges against this young man, brand new to the ship. And then I had a session with the leadership team, not only this leadership team, but every level of leadership here on out. And I use this as an example of why it's so important to employ and to activate the power of your presence. People need to hear why their jobs are important. If you don't know, then you got to come talk to somebody who does know. At the very least, come talk to me. I was accessible, and there was no reason that people couldn't talk to me about this. So I was always thereafter aware. And whenever I had a chance to speak to other companies, I always asked, people at various levels of leadership, how active are you at making sure that the young man or woman working on the factory floor understands how they're connected to the big dot, and when's the last time you checked on how many new people were brought into your shop? And the answers are usually pretty silent. They're pretty quiet. So I want to talk about the things that I think are important. So I could go on forever on this, but I try to keep these to about 30 minutes. But I think you get the point of what the middle 15s is all about. The how part. The things that you have to do, the power of your presence. You have the power to create opportunities, to expand operational envelopes, making sure that people are always challenged in a positive way, not in an overtaxing way, but making sure that they understand where they can possibly get to and why we need to get them there, and then high five them afterwards. And make sure that they're awarded at least by praise in front of the crew as to what they're doing. The power to create is just like an awesome responsibility, but what a privilege that is. You have the power to listen, and I'm talking about with your ears, with your eyes as you're making eye contact, not so much with your mouth. I would say leave that shut for the most part. I would have a sailor in the middle of the Gulf walking by and say, "Shipmate, how you doing?" And they go, "Great, Captain, great." And once in a while, when I wasn't doing so great, I'd stop that young man or woman and say, "Hey, shipmate, I need to understand why it is that you're doing great today, because I'm not doing so great. And whatever bug juice you're drinking at lunch, I need to have some of that bug juice, because I'm just not where you're at." Sometimes they, laugh and joke at me and pat me on the back and say, "Hey, we're getting it together," and I love to hear that. Sometimes I'd get, well, maybe I'm not as great as but I didn't want to make this hey, if I ask you enough times, you'll finally tell me you're not great. I didn't want to get into that scenario, but I really wanted people to understand that, I have days where I'm not so great, and I can usually use a pick-me-up if somebody's having a great day. So listening, watching their body language is really important to make sure I ask those questions at a key time. We talked about the power to connect the little dots to the big dots. I'm going to give you one other story other than the middle 15s. I think I've addressed it before, and that's my ship's laundry. It is a terrible job. It's hot. We always put young sailors newly reported to the ship before they may go down into their final assigned space and do laundry. There's hundreds of 50-pound laundry bags that come down every day. Nobody says thanks to these people. Nobody gives a hoot as to who they are or how hard they're working. I just found that what I had to go do, I learned this as XO and George Washington, and I did it on Inchon and Carl Vinson both as well, is to go down and talk to them about the quality of life improvement that they're putting together for everybody else. When I started the Navy, if I sent a laundry bag down to the ship's laundry and it was multiple colors and it was all sort of the same size, when I got back with things that were just like tied up into little knots, they were all the same color now. So, reds and yellows and greens and blues, they all turned into whatever they were. And they were usually 1 or 2 sizes too small. And I say, can you imagine all of your shipmates, places that you're going to be here in the not too distant future, and they get back to their rack at night. And can you imagine having what I used to experience when I was first in the Navy, or having clean pressed clothes that are identifiable and wearable? I mean, so the service you're providing is important. And I would always go back and tell the larger entities that they had to go down and say thank you, because not everyone worked down there, but everybody benefited from it. So it was something we worked really hard, is to connect that dot down there in the laundry to all the other dots on the ship, and it worked. It worked pretty well. People down there it didn't make the job any easier, but it made it a little more palatable. The power to help. I've read a lot of the debriefs from suicide attempts and suicide and people who were unfortunately able to actually execute the act of suicide from various ships and other places, squadrons as well. And usually one of the debrief items would be one or more sailors who would say, I noticed that there was something wrong, or something was not quite right. And, I couldn't figure out what it was, but I just didn't think it was really important. And that sort of made my shoulders sag. If we have the power to help, and if we see somebody who's an extremist or not quite right, then, and it applies everywhere, right? I mean, you see people who come in that are a little bit different than they were the previous weeks or days, and it's okay to ask them if everything's all right, or is there something you can do to help them, or inform a supervisor that you just notice that Seaman Billy or Seaman Sarah is not having a great day, and I asked them if everything was okay. They said it was, but I just want to make sure that you're aware that I saw these things happening. The power to help is essential, and again, it's an honor, and you should be able to do those things immediately so that we take care of these people. The power to soothe. It sort of plays in the power to help. Sometimes there are some smoking embers that that if we get in there and try and work and massage the issue, the multiple issues that are going on, we can prevent it from becoming an out of control forest fire. It could be stress at home. We all have seen that. We all have stress at home, but it's reassurance and making sure that people know that you're with them. And if you don't want to talk now, I'm here every day. I'm here wherever you want to meet me. Let's go talk to somebody else together and make sure that we can take care of these things. I really believe that these two, the power to help, power to soothe, can solve so many problems that we're seeing on our Navy ships right now, for example, before they get out of control. There are going to be some people who have legitimate challenges that cannot be taken care of by either of these, but at least we can identify and get it to the right people before it becomes an out of control forest fire. The power to persist. We've talked about this before. You can't expect it to be a power if you're not visible. You've got to be where the challenges are. When my my reactor department, the nukes, would have to light a plant off after 6 months in the yard, and we're getting ready to get to sea, they were always the hardest working group of people on the ship. And it would have been easy on a Saturday night for me to sit up in my house on the hill above the ship. But the reactor officer was smart enough to ask me to come down and spend some time down there while they were working. They don't want me to touch a wrench, rightfully so. They don't want me to play along with the electrical systems that they have on the ship. But we can get them food. I can pat them on the back. I can if they're having some challenges at home with a young child that's in school, we'll get them the help. We'll do whatever it is. But the power to persist means that we all have to be there to help wherever we can, however we can. I think that applies to a lot of big companies who have big factory lines, and then they have office spaces over here and they have office spaces over here. But really where the pedal, hits the metal here is down on that factory floor. And the power to persist is so important there. So that's really, I think, where I think we need to spend a lot more time. Persist, and you got to be there. The power to elevate dreams. I love it when a young man or woman comes to me and they tell me that, that I just don't know why I'm here. I'm sad. I'm frustrated. And this happened on numerous occasions. I want to be home. I miss my family. And I would get back and say, let's talk about what you've got here. You're here. Let's make this an honorable experience. And let's take a look at all the opportunities that you have in front of you, him or her, the opportunities to get an education, the opportunities to find a rate that you're interested in, an opportunity to perhaps work your way into an officer's billet. Whatever those things are, they are all available. We're here to help you get there. The discovery of who one is and where they want to go, we've talked about that. Knowing who you are so you can become as great as you can be, and then follow the following iteration that goes on after that. And those things were like so important. The elevation of dreams sometimes is taking what you have and putting it into a different context. When we would man the rail as we were coming in and out of Pearl Harbor and passing the USS Arizona Memorial, there were a lot of young men and women standing there, didn't want to get their whites on. It's usually an early morning experience. But when they got up there and they're passing the Arizona Memorial, standing at attention, and they realize what's below that water line in terms of the gravesite for so many war dead and heroes, all of a sudden it clicks with their oath and clicks as to why they're serving. So you got to find those opportunities to help elevate dreams. And it extends to family members, right? So make sure that, and I'm going to talk later about my grandchildren and how I'm trying to elevate their dreams through the power of my presence. It goes. There's a piece that I'm going to talk about several weeks from now about that the chain of command is longer than you think. It's just not you and me. It's our spouses. It's our families. It's our grandkids. It's whatever it is that however large that tribe has become. And the last one is to sustain faith in the pursuit of personal and professional goals. I guess that can be part of the persistence piece, but what I mean by this is look for opportunities to get those degrees and those other things. I had a master's of business administration on Carl Vinson well before distance learning was a thing. We essentially just stole equipment and stole bandwidth. I hope nobody's going to report on me now. It's too late probably. But we worked a program with Georgia State College in Milledgeville where Carl Vinson was born and raised, and we put together a program. So and they wanted that. So that's a pursuit in the faith of being able to get whatever it is that make these people feel worthwhile. And we're going to talk about some other experiences in one of our tribes on USS Incheon when we really had to overcome some significant events that were going to make it too hard. So that's all about that power of the presence. Then there's the power of our presence. Now the power of our presence is broken up into a variety of tribes. And I was going to get to it today, but I want to spend a little more time talking about it in the next cycle. And there's a couple of great books. One is by Dave Logan called Tribal Leadership. And then there's another book called Great Teams, 16 Things. And it talks about a variety of high performance organizations and what they do differently. I want to spend a separate session on this because I used Dave Logan's book really to define where we were in our cycle in terms of whether or not we were connected from top to bottom, departmental wise. Some places we had a better starting point. In Incheon we had a not so good starting point, and not to the fault of the young men and women. They just really had to really work hard and overcome a lot of things. And to the credit of the leadership and to them personally, the power of their individual presence and people working together, connecting those dots, doing all the things that we just talked about, made that happen. And I'm going to follow up and do that one this week as well. I don't want this podcast to be too far and distant from the other podcast. But the whole issue is about tribes. I think about tribes. I look at tribes from a perspective, and we have multiple tribes, right? And there's a covenantry in those tribes, and that's unofficial contracts, social agreements, official contracts that like we take in our oath, and those types of things. And there's a common culture that's created, and our tribes are our family, our family, our workplace, other social networks. So I think if it's okay with you, I'm just going to hold off and spend a little more time talking about tribes at the next event. I want to go down to the power of His presence. The power of His presence. So I had really good chaplains when I had my various ships and various places I used to work, and they did a lot of things for me, and they would always come out and spend time with me, and usually after an evening prayer or some other event, they would come up and talk to me about how it might, how did I think that it applied to my job. And there were 4 or 5 that I've always kept. I'm going to talk to you about 2 or 3 of them as I'm starting to get close to my time here. And so I'd hear the biblical passage, and then the chaplain would come down. We'd have a discussion in one way or another, and I'd ask how it applied to me. Let me read one of them to you. It's Matthew 26, verse 34. And it was about when Jesus told the Apostle Peter that 3 times before the cock crows, you'll have denied me 3 times. And the Apostle Peter was incredulous. He said, "No way! I'm not ever going to do that to you." And of course he did. And then the cock crowed, and then he was just beside himself, so sad, and was just not consolable. So when the chaplain asked me, how does that apply to what I do for a living in terms of leadership and taking care of my people? I said, well, I thought Peter had it easier than I have it. And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, it's all about trust. If I were to break a promise to any of my people once, I've lost their trust, and it would take me eons to get that trust back. Peter had 3 opportunities and he still blew it. And so, it reminds me that at the forefront, that what promises I've made, what commitments I've made, make what I do and how I'm able to accomplish it so much easier if I maintain that trust. The power of trust is so important here. There's another one that goes goes like this: "I'm the vine and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, it is that bears much fruit." Jesus is the vine, the true source of life for us believers. We are the branches connected to him. And the whole issue here was, where is that fruit born? And the fruit is born from the vines that are connected to the branches. What I got out of this, without getting into too much detail, was that those roles are reversible. I mean, there could be days where my people are the branches and I'm the vine, where I'm producing the fruit. And so I just had to be aware of what those relationships were about. And it would give either way. I could have, it was a point really where I just had to make sure that first of all, we were connected. Obviously the branches or the vines are not going to live out the branches, and without the vines, the branches are useless because there's no fruit to be born. So I always use that to remind myself that, and I would walk around saying, "All right, I'm the vine today, you're the branches. What do you need from me?" And when I had to put that shoe on the other foot, I'd say, "I'm just the branch today. You are the vine. I need your fruit. I need your effort. I need your production. I need you to be focused." And they understand that correlation. And they heard that same biblical passage I did. And I would use it in that sort of context. And it was very useful, and I thought very important. The last is one that actually I've just got from my parish priest here now as a civilian, because I'm still interested in leadership. And I believe you never stop learning. And I was sitting in church one Sunday, and he started his sermon, and he said, if you're pushing a shopping cart, and when one side of the aisle it is stocked with power, and on the other side of the aisle is stocked with humility, what are you going to put in your cart? Now, the toxic leader will just fill that cart full of power. He or she does not figure out that they have to be, there's no humble, they don't have to be humble. There's no humility that they have to be worried about. It's humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's the way I got closer to my people. It's the ability to recognize that what my limitations were, acknowledge my mistakes, and be open to feedback. I already knew what my power was. I was the captain of the ship, or I was the XO of the ship, or captain or CO of my squadron. There was power that was inferred with those jobs. But I didn't have to display it. I didn't have to become so toxic that it was just about my power and my ability to will you to do something. I needed to be able to sit up there and make sure that you understood that I understood my limitations and my acknowledgments. And in fact, I had to have the humility to be able to admit when I was wrong, like I did in front of my entire crew on Carl Vinson one night at a captain's call, 3,000 sailors down in the hangar bay, and I had made from a leadership perspective, it was a mistake that I knew, and I knew that my crew knew. And the only way I was going to get this all back to where it needed to be is tell them that I was wrong. I know I'm wrong, and I'm not going to let it ever happen again. And please, let me continue to get better while we all collectively get better. That's how I had to approach my life, right? Because I just was not a perfect person. And so that is the way I think you learn from each other as well. I wanted everyone to be able to use humility in that regard, so that if we made mistakes or we didn't know an answer to something, we could admit that we didn't know the answer to that, whatever that thing was. So this is the power of our presence. Middle 15s. Listen to the sermons. Listen about all those various powers we talked about. The power to heal, the power to soothe, the power to pursue, all of those. It's so important in what we do in our job and in our family and in our social networks. It fires me up every time I think about it. I'm going to be, I'm getting to be older than most of you are. I'll be 73 here pretty soon. And I still believe I have a role in leadership. I still am as humble as I can be because I'm still making mistakes every day. But I'm not giving up. I'm persisting, like you read about, to make this country as great as we can make it. I want you to do the same thing. Take care of your people. Keep asking them questions. Motivate them to excel. Elevate their dreams. And when we maybe get out of bounds a little bit, put it back in there, but do not lose their trust. I hope you have a great night. 3,500 more meters today in the pool today. So we're doing great. One of these days I'll give you my record for 2023. I tallied up my meters. It was a lot of miles, but it keeps me sane. I love you all. Hope you enjoy this session, and we'll be back to you. Bye-bye.